In a moment that stunned royal watchers around the globe, Buckingham Palace released a statement no one saw coming, announcing a major title change for Princess Anne, scheduled for 2026, a decision that immediately sparked intense speculation, intrigue, and talk of a possible major shift within the monarchy. As behind the carefully polished language of the announcement, there seemed to be a deeper story involving power, loyalty, and legacy, leaving people wondering what truly pushed the palace to rewrite such a long-standing tradition and why this change was being made now, especially as the statement carried the calm authority of centuries-old royal formality, yet still felt unusually weighty, as if history itself was quietly shifting in motion, which led to instant global reaction where newsrooms erupted into analysis and disbelief. Commentators spoke with caution. Historians searched for any precedent, and royal watchers faced a mystery they could not easily place within known tradition, while headlines rapidly filled with urgent interpretations, trying to decode every word and hidden meaning, with some suggesting it could signal a reimagining of royal hierarchy, others calling it a delayed recognition or a strategic decision made behind closed doors. But the statement itself offered no clarity and instead only deepened curiosity by provoking more questions than answers, which is often how powerful royal announcements work. Because in monarchy, a title is never just symbolic, but represents authority, legitimacy, and long-standing heritage, meaning even a single change can reshape perception and challenge tradition itself. And this is what made the focus on Princess Anne even more intense, given her reputation for duty, discipline, and quiet resilience within the royal family, as she has long been regarded as one of the most hardworking royals who never chased attention but consistently fulfilled her responsibilities with unwavering commitment. And so this announcement did not feel like a simple update, but rather like a historic signal of recognition or transformation, something that carried emotional and institutional weight far beyond its formal wording. The reaction to the announcement was immediate and electric across the world, as within minutes news platforms, social media discussions, and royal analysis forums were flooded with reactions, each trying to make sense of what Buckingham Palace had truly signaled, while commentators carefully dissected every phrase of the statement as if hidden meanings were embedded between the lines, and historians quickly began comparing it with past royal decisions to find even a single example that might explain such an unusual move, but most were left admitting that nothing quite matched the scale of speculation now surrounding Princess Anne's upcoming title change, which only deepened the mystery and kept public attention growing with every passing hour. While in many countries, the news was treated not just as a royal update, but as a potential turning point in modern monarchy, with some experts suggesting it could reflect internal restructuring within the royal family, and others believing it might be an intentional recognition of Princess Anne's decades of service that had often gone quietly acknowledged rather than publicly celebrated, yet no official clarification came from the palace, which made the silence itself feel meaningful, almost as if the institution was allowing interpretation to unfold naturally. And in this space of uncertainty, the narrative expanded rapidly, blending fact with speculation and turning the story into something larger than a simple title change, because it was no longer just about what had been announced, but about what it might represent for the future of the crown, especially at a time when modern expectations and traditional royal structures often seem to exist in delicate balance. And in the center of all this attention stood Princess Anne herself, a royal long respected for her discipline, resilience, and refusal to seek attention despite being one of the most active members of the monarchy, which made this sudden global focus on her even more striking, as people began revisiting her long history of service, her consistent public duties, and her reputation as someone who carried responsibility without complaint. And this contrast between her quiet life and sudden global spotlight added another layer of intrigue to the situation, making the entire announcement feel less like an isolated decision and more like the beginning of a much larger story still unfolding. As speculation continued to grow, deeper questions began to surface about whether this title change was truly just a form of recognition or something more strategically planned within the royal structure. Because while no official explanation had been given, the scale and timing of the announcement led many observers to believe it was not a spontaneous decision, but rather the result of long and careful deliberation behind palace walls, where discussions about the future of the monarchy are often held in strict confidence and shaped by tradition, protocol, and long-term stability. And within that context, Princess Anne's name stood out even more strongly due to her decades of unwavering service, as she has consistently been regarded as one of the most dependable and disciplined members of the royal family, rarely involved in controversy and almost always focused on duty rather than public attention, which is why many analysts began to interpret the announcement as a possible acknowledgement of her role as a stabilizing force within the institution, while others suggested it could reflect a broader effort by the monarchy to adapt to modern expectations by highlighting merit and contribution alongside traditional lineage. And although these interpretations varied, they all pointed toward one central idea that the monarchy may be quietly evolving in ways that are not immediately visible to the public. And this possibility only added to the sense of intrigue surrounding the announcement, because the more people tried to understand it, the more complex it appeared, especially as Princess Anne herself remained consistent in her well-known private and reserved nature, offering no public reaction beyond her usual composed presence, which further deepened the mystery and allowed global curiosity to continue building around what this moment truly represents for both her and the institution she has served for her entire life. As the global conversation intensified, attention naturally shifted from speculation about the announcement itself toward a deeper reflection on what a royal title actually represents within the structure of monarchy. Because in this world, a title is never just ceremonial language, but a carefully defined symbol of authority, responsibility, and historical continuity. And changing it is never treated lightly, since even the smallest adjustment can influence perception across generations. Which is why the idea of Princess Anne receiving a new designation carried such extraordinary significance, especially given how consistently she has embodied duty, discipline, and loyalty throughout her life of service. And this led many observers to revisit her long public journey, recalling how she has always worked in the background of royal life without seeking recognition, carrying out engagements with steady commitment while avoiding unnecessary attention, which in itself made her stand apart within the modern royal family. And as this reflection grew, so did the understanding that the announcement was not just about a future title, but about the weight of a lifetime already lived in service. Because in monarchy, recognition often arrives slowly and carries meaning far beyond the moment it is given, shaping legacy in ways that extend into history itself. And this is what made the situation so compelling for both supporters and analysts, as they tried to connect the present announcement with decades of consistent service that had long defined Princess Anne's public identity, while also considering whether this moment represented a symbolic acknowledgement of her role as one of the most reliable figures within the institution, someone who has remained constant even as the world around the monarchy has continued to change. And in that contrast between quiet dedication and sudden global attention, the story gained even more depth, turning into something that felt less like a single decision and more like a reflection of how the monarchy itself understands value, loyalty, and long-term contribution in an evolving modern era. As the narrative surrounding Princess Anne's upcoming title change continued to develop, attention gradually moved beyond public reaction and began focusing on the deeper structure of the monarchy itself, where decisions of this scale are rarely simple or immediate but instead emerge from long periods of consideration, discussion, and careful balancing of tradition with modern expectations. And this is why many insiders and observers started to believe that the announcement reflected more than just recognition of personal service, instead hinting at a broader institutional intention to reinforce stability and continuity within the royal family, especially at a time when public scrutiny of monarchy remains consistently high. And within this context, Princess Anne's position became even more central to the conversation because of her long-standing reputation as one of the most dependable figures in the royal household, someone who has consistently carried out duties with discipline, reliability, and a strong sense of responsibility without ever actively seeking prominence or praise, which led commentators to view her as a natural anchor within the institution. And as these interpretations spread, the story took on an even larger dimension, shifting from a single title change to a possible reflection of how the monarchy values endurance and service over visibility and spectacle, while at the same time raising questions about how future roles within the royal family may be defined, especially as newer generations begin to take on more responsibility and the institution continues to adapt to a changing world. And through all of this, Princess Anne remained characteristically private and composed, offering no dramatic response, which only added to the sense that her role in this unfolding moment was not about personal ambition, but about recognition of a lifetime spent in consistent and quiet dedication to royal duty. As speculation deepened further, a more complex layer of discussion began to emerge around what this title change could mean for the internal balance of the royal family. Because within monarchy, even subtle adjustments in titles can carry long-term implications for hierarchy, influence, and the perception of authority. And this is why analysts started paying closer attention, not only to Princess Anne herself, but also to the broader structure of decision-making within Buckingham Palace, where such changes are typically shaped through careful consultation and long-standing tradition rather than sudden action. And although no official details were released about the internal process, the nature of the announcement led many to believe that it was the result of extended planning rather than a spontaneous gesture, especially given Princess Anne's decades of uninterrupted service and her widely recognized reputation as a stabilizing presence during both public and private challenges faced by the monarchy. And as this perspective gained traction, the discussion shifted again toward the idea that her elevation might represent a symbolic reinforcement of continuity at a time when the institution is navigating modern pressures and evolving expectations, while also highlighting the importance of loyalty and long-term contribution within royal roles. And this interpretation added emotional depth to the story, because it framed the announcement not just as a structural change, but as a form of acknowledgement for a life defined by steady commitment rather than public recognition. And in that sense, the focus returned, once again, to Princess Anne herself, whose consistent approach to duty over decades has made her a unique figure within the royal family, someone whose influence has often been felt more through action than through visibility. And this quiet but powerful presence is exactly what continues to make her central to discussions about the future direction of the monarchy. As the discussion continued to expand across media and public platforms, attention increasingly turned toward the idea that this announcement might reflect not only recognition of Princess Anne's long service, but also a carefully considered effort to reinforce the monarchy's long-term stability. Because within royal tradition, such decisions are rarely isolated events and are often connected to broader planning that takes place over many years behind palace doors, where senior advisors and members of the royal household evaluate how each change might influence the institution's future direction. And in this light, Princess Anne's name carried particular significance due to her long-established role as one of the most consistent and dependable figures within the family. Known for her unwavering commitment to duty, her disciplined approach to public responsibilities, and her ability to remain steady during periods of both public attention and internal challenge, which is why many observers began to interpret the announcement as a reflection of how deeply her contribution is valued within the structure of the monarchy, even if it has often been expressed quietly rather than through formal recognition. And as this interpretation spread, the conversation gradually shifted from simple curiosity about the title itself to a broader reflection on how institutions evolve while still maintaining continuity, especially when balancing tradition with the expectations of a modern audience. And within this evolving narrative, Princess Anne emerged not only as the focus of a major royal development, but also as a symbol of long-term dedication within an institution that relies heavily on consistency and trust, making her role in this moment feel both historic and deeply connected to the ongoing story of the monarchy's adaptation over time. As the story continued to unfold, the focus gradually moved toward the emotional and symbolic meaning behind Princess Anne's long journey within the monarchy. Because beyond the official announcement and global speculation, there was a deeper human narrative shaped by decades of service, sacrifice than ever, and unwavering responsibility. And this is what made the situation feel so significant to many observers who began to see her, not just as a royal figure, but as someone whose entire life had been dedicated to fulfilling duty without seeking recognition. And within this perspective, her upcoming title change was increasingly viewed as a moment that could represent long-delayed acknowledgement of that lifelong commitment, especially considering how consistently she has maintained her role through changing times, public pressures, and evolving expectations placed on the royal family, always choosing stability and discipline over visibility or personal promotion, which is why analysts and commentators started framing this development as part of a larger narrative about how institutions recognize value and contribution over time. And as these interpretations deepened, the story also began to highlight the contrast between public perception and private reality within royal life, where much of the decision-making remains unseen, yet carries long-lasting impact on both individuals and the institution as a whole. And in this evolving understanding, Princess Anne's position became even more central, not only because of what the announcement suggested about her future role, but also because of what it revealed about her past, her consistent dedication, and the quiet strength she has shown throughout her life, making her journey feel like a defining thread in the broader fabric of modern monarchy. As anticipation for 2026 continued to build, the discussion surrounding Princess Anne's title change began to take on an even wider significance, shifting from individual recognition to a broader conversation about the future identity of the monarchy itself, because many observers started to see this moment as part of a gradual transformation in how the institution presents itself to the world, balancing its long-standing traditions with the need to remain relevant in a modern and fast-changing environment. And within that context, Princess Anne's elevation was increasingly interpreted as both symbolic and strategic, reflecting not only her decades of disciplined service, but also the monarchy's quiet effort to reinforce stability through figures who embody consistency, loyalty, and public trust. And this interpretation gained strength from the fact that she has long been regarded as one of the most reliable members of the royal family, someone who has consistently prioritized duty over personal attention and maintained a steady presence even during periods of public scrutiny or institutional pressure, which made her central role in this unfolding moment feel almost inevitable in the eyes of many commentators, while also highlighting how deeply her work has been woven into the day-to-day functioning of royal life. And as these ideas continued to circulate, the narrative surrounding the announcement expanded further, becoming less about a single title change and more about what it represents in terms of legacy, recognition, and institutional evolution, ultimately positioning Princess Anne as a key figure in a much larger story about continuity and change within the monarchy's ongoing journey through history. As the final stage of this unfolding story comes into focus, attention returns once again to the central question that has surrounded Princess Anne's historic title change, and that is what this moment ultimately means for both her personal legacy and the future of the monarchy. Because after all the speculation, analysis, and interpretation, what remains clear is that this development represents far more than a simple ceremonial adjustment. Instead, standing as a powerful symbol of recognition shaped by decades of unwavering service, quiet dedication, and an approach to royal duty defined by consistency rather than spectacle. And within this framework, Princess Anne's journey takes on an even deeper meaning, as it reflects not only her individual path, but also the evolving nature of the institution she has served throughout her life, where tradition continues to hold strong while gradually adapting to modern expectations and changing public perspectives. And this balance between heritage and transformation is what gives the announcement its lasting impact, as it suggests a monarchy that is capable of honoring long-standing commitment while also reshaping its structure in subtle but meaningful ways. And in this sense, Princess Anne's elevation becomes more than just a title change. It becomes a reflection of endurance, loyalty, and the quiet strength that has supported the royal family through decades of change, ultimately leaving behind a narrative that is not only about recognition in the present moment, but also about how legacy is built over time and how certain figures come to embody the stability of an entire institution, even as that institution continues to move forward into an uncertain yet evolving future.